Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is part of a long series for a readathon that I did called Beaches and Books 2024 Readathon that was hosted by some lovely ladies who I will put their information in the description below. And so what I did is I started with the intro going into July, what books I hoped to read, and then I have a video of the recap of the books that I did read and how I rated them. And if you are watching this video, then you are watching the more in-depth video that I did for each book. So this video is for the prompt, a book that made waves in the community. And the book that I chose for that was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And this book is realistic fiction, drama, young adult. In fact, some people say that S.E. Hinton created the young adult genre with this book. And so I think there can be an argument made for that. And it is actually, according to the AR reading level, 4.7. And this is a prime example where the AR reading level is really only looking at like page numbers, word count, vocabulary, and difficulty of a text, and not really looking at content, because this is not a book that I would recommend for fourth graders to read. It is a book that I recommend more teenagers read. I think that pretty much 16 and up, this used to be required reading for a lot of schools. I don't think it still is, but I think this is a book that definitely should be required reading for high schoolers. It has a lot of really important themes and information and perspectives that I think, regardless of your social position, is really important to read and hear. So let's go ahead and get into it. In my opinion, this book is really a social commentary on social classes and the tension and the conflict that rest within the social classes. So it takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the author was, I believe she said she was 15 when she started writing the book and 16 when it was published. And it really is a reflection of her experiences. And it's almost this outpouring and kind of like a release in a journal for herself to kind of deal with and process the things that she saw. So I don't think it's a true story in the sense that these actual events happened, but I think it's a true representation of gang life and the decisions and problems and conflicts that they have, like even within themselves, but also within the community. The Outsiders follows our main character, Pony Boy, which is really his name, and he lives with his two brothers after his parents have been killed in a car accident. And the story really highlights, as I mentioned before, the tensions between these two social groups. And it takes place in Oklahoma, and you have the one social group is called the Greasers, and they are a group of teenage boys who live on the east side of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they keep their hair long and greased. And then you have this other social group, the Soches, I think is how you pronounce it, the Soches, and they are a group of rich teenagers who live on the west side. So at this point and in all of these videos is when I'm going to just read a few passages, and I really like doing this because it gives you a feel of the type of language and words that are being written, and it also kind of gives you some insight of whether this is a type of book that you would want your child to read and at what age you would want them to read. Because maybe it's just a book that is a great book like this one is, but it's a not right now book. It's in a few years book, but it might be a right now book. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this is page 3, and just kind of laying the foundation of who's in the book and a little bit of information about them. So it says, since Mom and Dad were killed in an auto wreck, the three of us get to stay together only as long as we behave. So Soda, which is the middle brother's name, is Soda Pop, and that is, again, his real name on the birth certificate. That comes up. So Soda and I stay out of trouble as much as we can, and we're careful not to get caught when we can. I only mean that most greasers do things like that. Just like we wear our hair long and dress in blue jeans and t-shirts, or leave our shirt tails out and wear leather jackets and tennis shoes or boots. I'm not saying that either Soches or Greases are better. That's just the way things are. This next quote is when Johnny and Pony Boy are together and they're talking to a girl who is a Soch. and this is a conversation between them and her, and she asks them, she observes that they are young but not innocent, and so this is what Johnny says to her in response to that. "Dally's okay," Johnny said defensively, and I nodded. "You take up for your buddies, no matter what they do. When you're a gang, you stick up for the members. If you don't stick up for them, stick together, make like brothers. It isn't a gang anymore, it's a pack. A snarling, distrustful, bickering pack like the Socs and their social clubs, or the street gangs in New York, or the wolves in the timber. He's tough, but he's a cool guy." And they're talking about one of the other members, Dallas. So that kind of just gives you an idea of a mindset, and that idea of kind of the sticking together and the difference between the two as far as the greasers' perspective. Like, we're friends, we stick together, we stand up for each other, but the Socs are really each one for themselves. They're a pack, like a pack of wolves, but they don't stick up for each other. And we'll see that fleshed out a little bit more throughout the story. So this next section is still the same conversation with Ponyboy, Johnny, and the Soc girl, whose name is Sherry. And I really like this section because this part, it brings some commonality between the two classes and between the two groups of people, and highlights that even within the, like, let's say stereotypes within each group of the greasers and the Socs, that the stereotypes within them, there are individuals in each group who are different and who set different norms and who can reach out from within their group to form some sort of friendship and connection and commonality. And I think that that perspective is really, really important to think about, that when we have groups, whatever groups we want to think about, that we have perspectives and stereotypes within that group, but we have to remember that within that group there are individuals, and the individuals may or may not live up to those stereotypes, and how important it is that those individuals can step out and find commonality and find common ground. And this next section I think really highlights that, and that's what I like about this. So Sherry says, "You read a lot, don't you, Ponyboy?" I was startled. "Yeah? Why?" She kind of shrugged. "I could just tell. I'll bet you watch sunsets too." She was quiet for a minute after I nodded. "I used to watch them too, before I got so busy." I pictured that, or tried to. Maybe Sherry stood still and watched the sunset while she was supposed to be taking the garbage out. Stood there and watched and forgot everything else until her big brother screamed at her to hurry up. I shook my head. It seemed so funny to me that the sunset she saw from her patio and the one that I saw from the back steps was the same one. Maybe the two different worlds we lived in weren't so different. We saw the same sunset. I mean, what a beautiful. And again, you read that and think, she was 16, and that a 16-year-old can pick up on that depth. And this book is just amazing. All right, let's get into, this is much further into the book. This is page 116. And again, I think there's only 180 pages. So there's going to be some spoiler alerts because I can't read the passages without some sort of spoiler. So if you want no more information, don't keep listening. But if you kind of want the information to kind of filter out what type of book this is, definitely keep listening. This part is an exchange between Ponyboy and one of the Socs, Bob, and Bob was friends with one of the Socs who was killed. And so he comes over and he talks to Ponyboy, and this is what Bob has to say. He's dead. His mother had a nervous breakdown. They spoiled him rotten. I mean, most parents would be proud of a kid like that. Good looking and smart and everything. But they gave in to him all the time. He kept trying to make someone say no, and they never did. They never did. That was what he wanted. For somebody to tell him no. To have somebody lay down the law, set the limits, give him something solid to stand on. That's what we all want, really. One time, Randy tried to grin, but I could tell he was close to tears. One time, he came home drunker than anything. He thought sure they were gonna raise the roof. You know what they did? They thought it was something they'd done. They thought it was their fault, that they'd failed him and driven him to it or something. They took all the blame and didn't do anything to him. If his old man had just belted him just once, he might still be alive. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I couldn't tell anyone else. My friends, they think I was off my rocker turning soft. Maybe I am. I just know that I'm sick of this whole mess. Okay, again, the profoundness in that. This goes back to some other videos where I was talking about when I studied images of Christ in the novels, and where you just really start looking for where are those passages in a book, or just direct storylines or quotes or things that really highlight what the Bible teaches. And this I just thought was so profound and so relates to what the Bible teaches, is that we need boundaries. We need to have, as young children and even as adults, we need to know where we stand. We need safe and secure boundaries to know when we're inside of those boundaries and when we're outside of those boundaries. And if you never have somebody, especially that parent-child relationship, where there are no boundaries, it's actually extremely frightening to a child. There was a study, and I don't remember all the details, but it was a study about a playground, and they didn't have any fences around the playground. And when there were no fences, the children would just stay as close to the buildings as possible, and they would stay there where they felt safe. And as soon as they put the fences around, the children would run the entire length and width of the playground that was available to them, because they knew where the boundary was, and they knew how far they could go, and they knew what their limits were. And that same concept is in the Bible, and the same concept is obviously truth. And again, for a 16-year-old to pick up on all of that is just incredible. But those messages need to be heard. Those messages need to be taught, and it's important that adults keep that in mind for their children, but also for teenagers to hear that the boundaries their parents put on them and the expectations that they put on them. The kids need that. What does he say? He says that's what we all want, really. And so he's saying, like, deep down, we all want that boundary. We all need to know what the limits are. So again, just such a powerful truth. Just two more quotes I'm going to look at. So the next one is one of the greasers is killed, and this is the exchange between two of the other greasers. So I'll start here. I think it'll make a little more sense with this context. The way 2-Bit, which is one of the names of the greasers, their names are very funny in the book, but the way 2-Bit, after the police had taken Dally's body away, had griped because he had lost his switchblade when they searched Dallas. "Is that all that's bothering you? The switchblade?" A red-eyed Steve had snapped at him. "No," 2-Bit had said with a shivering sigh, "but that's what I'm wishing was all that was bothering me." And isn't that true, right? When there's something so grievous that we're trying to process, that we grieve the lesser thing because we want that lesser thing to be all that the problem is. And that feeling of the real thing I have to deal with is too heavy. And so I'm going to take it a step back, and I'm going to deal with the lesser thing that's more manageable to grieve, and the lesser thing that's more manageable to miss, and I'm going to process that because it's just too much to process the greater thing. And I just thought that was just so profound. So the last part is going to be the last paragraph, and one thing that I really appreciate about this book also is that you have adults in the background, and the adults are everything. Some of the adults are absolutely horrible. Some of the adults just make really poor choices, but some of the adults really advocate and fight for the kids. Especially if you read the book, you're going to see with Pony Boy's storyline where some key adults made a difference, that his life, the outcomes would have been really different had they approached situations differently. And I appreciate that there's not this like adults against teenagers feeling in this book, because teenagers do need adults. Like, they do need an advocate. They do need somebody who sees their perspective and who can advocate for them. And I think we see that throughout this story as well. We see both, and I really appreciate that. So this last part is the English teacher talks to Pony Boy because of course he's falling behind in his English class, which if you read the story you will understand why. And the English teacher is giving him some options to raise his grade. And so this is how the story ends, but it's in response to the conversation with the English teacher. I sat down and picked up my pen and thought for a minute, remembering a handsome dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper. A tough tow-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth and a bitter grin on his hard face. Remembering, and this time it didn't hurt. A quiet, defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting badly and who had black eyes with frightened expression on them. 1 week had taken all three of them, and I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. I wondered for a long time how to start that theme, how to start writing about something that was so important to me. And I finally began like this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight of the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home. And that's exactly how the story starts. So it ends how it starts. It's that circular ending and brings you right back to the beginning of the story and brings you to tears maybe as well. So anyways, I hope you got a good glimpse of the feel for this book, how it's written, some of the themes in the book, and I hope that it's something you consider picking up as well. Thank you. Bye.